Hey, Yonan here. Today I'm bringing you the Mallory Phorus V2 prototype. Let's jump right in with some specs. S35VN flat grind, PVD coated blade, coated titanium scales. It is a liner lock. It uses fat carbon for the scale inlays. It has a milled clip. We got 3.5 inches of usable edge, 4 3/8 on the scale length, a tip to tail length of 7 1/8, and 3.4 ounces, pretty light for the overall weight. So let's jump right in with impressions and likes. I've always loved the look of Dylan's knife designs. This one is no different. The Phorus is probably my favorite design by him. And if I were ever going to splurge for one of these, the Phorus would probably be the one that I would go for. The knife has solid ergos. There are 2 comfortable hand positions, one here, large size glove hands and hammer grip, plenty of room on the back for larger size fingers, a forward grip with a very, very generous finger choil, which I also really love. So again, 2 good hand positions and lots of room for people with bigger hands. Fit and finish on the knife is excellent. You can't feel any transition between the scales and the inlays on the knife. The pocket clip is well done, has some springiness to it, and is completely functional as an EDC knife pocket clip. So kudos on that as well. The tuning on the knife is excellent. It fires out there every time, and it drops shut very nicely. This is a fairly thin knife in your hand. It has a full-length back spacer, or palm swell spacer, which is interesting to me. Overall, like I said, it's a great slicer and a cutter. This prototype version came in S35VN. The finished ones, from my understanding, are S90V, which does raise the price a little bit, but it has a great blade. Did a tiny bit of cutting with it. It's very slicey. Feels good in your hand. So kudos for all of those things, for sure. By the way, the knife EDC is excellent. The clip is super functional, and there's just, because it's so smooth here on the side and there's no issues with the fit and finish, you'd hardly notice this knife in your pocket, even though it has a good amount of length to it. All right, issues or dislikes. The knife may feel too slender this way for a lot of people, and it has a reasonably thin blade spine as well. I wish there was some jimping on the blade spine over here. I think that would be helpful to people in terms of just, feeling a little bit more confident in making those cuts and being in that position. But overall, I think the knife is very, very comfortable to hold. Just think it might be a little bit thin on the width for some people. Doesn't really bother me, but it is definitely a thinner type of knife. The pocket clip is reversible, but they didn't include, at least on the prototype, any kind of filler tab or standoff here, and you have to disassemble the back of the knife. In other words, you have to take the knife apart to be able to get to the screws which come through from the inside to the outside to actually hold the pocket clip on there. So while it is reversible, it requires a good amount of work on a left-handed user's part to do that. And also, one other thing, the balance point on the knife is pretty far back. The balance point on the knife is here. It's pretty much 1.5 inches, 1 3/4 behind the pivot point. There's no lightening or machining of the knife back here, so that might be why there's just so much weight in the back that you can't really get the knife to feel fully balanced. So the balance point on the knife would have you holding it with 2 fingers, would have you holding it back here. I would like to see that up closer to the pivot. That's just me. Obviously, if you're holding it in the front choil position, where a lot of people will, it's not an issue for you, but it is something I mention in all of my videos. So let's do a couple of quick size comparisons for you. So first, let's show you this knife next to a O-Knife Drever. I think this is a very apt comparison. They're virtually identical in overall length from tip to tail. The pivots are almost in the same place. They both have very, very large choils. The O-Knife has a bigger cutout here. I did notice one other thing, that this cutout here for where you get to release the liner lock is a bit on the small side right there. And so that's one other small thing I noticed. But I think these knives size-wise are very, very comparable. If you've ever held or owned an O-knife Drever, it's exactly the same size as the Mallory Phorus V2. I will say this, the Drever is substantially thicker than the Phorus. There's a noticeable difference in thickness. Let me show you another knife that would be in the same range, and a lot of people own this. This is why I'm using it. So we'll go pivot to pivot here, and you can see it's very similar in size. There's a little bit more blade length and a little bit more handle length. The angle might look a little funny, but it's very similar in size to the CJRB Pyrite or Pyrite Wharncliffe. Very, very similar in terms of thickness as well. These are very similar thickness-wise, so they're both kind of thin, slender type of knives. And then one more I'll show you, kind of an old favorite. This is a Benchmade 940 in S30V and carbon, S90V and carbon fiber. And these knives are exactly the same length. Tip to tail on these suckers, they line up absolutely perfect. They're virtually identical as far as overall length. Again, the S90V version of the 940 is just ever so slightly thicker, but they are both fairly, kind of thin knives. So there you have it. So let me summarize. The S90V V2 version, which is out on the market now, is $435 or thereabouts. It comes with slightly different fat carbon fiber coloring and an S90V instead of S35 VN blade. Otherwise, the ergos and everything else is going to be the same. I don't know if they're going to offer this S35 version of this knife or not. I would imagine that would probably be in somewhere in the mid-3s. But it's a super nice design, sleek, elegant, great fit and finish, very slicey, but you better be ready to fork out some serious money. If you're a Dylan Mallory fan, this won't be a hard sell at all. If you're somebody who has to think long and hard before you spend $300 or $400 or $500 on a knife, then this may take a little bit more. It may take a little bit more inspiration or a little bit more research on your part before you decide to spend the money on one of these. But again, it's a gorgeous knife, well made, feels great in your hand, and tuned very nicely. So there you have it, folks. There's the Dylan Mallory Phorus V2. This again is the production version, not the final, the prototype, not the final production version. Sorry about that. And I do thank you all for tuning in to the channel. As always, thanks for watching and stay sharp.